Okay then, Barry, do you want to talk us through your new toy then that you got yesterday?
Yeah, the Osprey Exos 46. This is a large version. Put it on the postal scales yesterday and it was about 1,060 grams, give or take. So it's quite lightweight and it's a large one. So it's not actually 46 litre capacity, it's allegedly 49. So that's a good size for a weekend. Or a week if you're an ultralight like myself. You've got features, very lightweight design material with various bits and pieces on. Side mesh pockets with a side entry and top entry. Compression strap, very thin, which can either go inside the pocket or outside the pocket depending on the usage of the pockets. The typical Osprey, unlike the Gregory, stretchy bucket pocket, I think they call this. There's tying points on the side for adding extra bungees if you wanted to. There's a bedroll loops down the bottom, which again very thin. Americans love the idea. So could you
cut those off if you don't want them?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to cut them off, but I know a few people probably would if you don't hang your bedroll off the end. I'm not a fan of doing that. There's only one ice tool attachment on these bags. Quite a long loop, which I think may be too long for use of. And a side entry pocket here, which I guess seems to be quite a big size, so you could get a complete set of waterproofs or even something like a hex free or something inside if you wanted to carry it there. Same on the other side, side entry mesh pocket, top, I've got poles in there and a top compression strap, and there's two bladder ports either side.
So is it too early to decide which way you want the compression straps at the moment, or?
Yeah, I mean, I stuffed the bag with a huge synthetic rucksack for this trip so that I could get an idea of how the bag looks when it's loaded. But for the purposes of today, I just used them internally because that's the way they are. I noticed when I filled the bag with the sleeping bag though, that the amount of give on the pockets was quite tight. I had a 1 litre bottle in here and it was quite a squeeze to fit it in, so they're not as big as they should be. It looks quite loose here, but once you've got something inside there, it's not quite as it's going to be quite a tight fit for same size. Coming around to the front of the bag, there's huge hip belt pockets. There's a camera in that one there.
Yeah, I noticed you've got quite a lot stuffed away inside those.
Yeah, well, I like my pockets for my snack bars.
Yeah, I know, it's half a sweet shop.
Yeah, I mean, because I suffer from diabetes and I can get blood sugar lows, I like to make sure I've got my hands on something that's going to get me back on track blood sugar wise. So anything with big pockets. So these are actually, I think, larger than the Atmos, certainly larger than the Gregory Z55. And again, they're mesh. The hip belt itself, as you can see, is very minimal in regards to the amount of foam, and it's all mesh. Now that wouldn't seem to be very supportive, but I've been carrying about 7 kilos in it today, and it feels like I've not been wearing a rucksack. It's a very comfortable fit for my back. And this design of the frame, which is kind of like a waisted design, is quite comfortable on the back. There's no lumbar pad, your back sits on the mesh. And again, with the load that I've had in it today, it's very comfortable. The straps, again, they've got holes punched in the foam. It's quite high density foam. There's a chest strap with a whistle in. There's a little pocket here, which I've got my mobile phone in, but it's about the same size as a small gecko would fit in there. And then there's this stow on the go mechanism for trekking poles, which I haven't tried today, although I've got my Trailblaze poles with me. I've not been using them, so I think later this afternoon I'm going to get them out and just have a look and see how this thing works. There's a loop on the bottom here, it's got elastic in it, which apparently allows you to stick the poles in while you're fiddling with your camera and what have you. The floating lid, inside mesh zip pocket, I guess we're putting wallet and other documents like passport if you need to. Top lid pocket, the key ring, which is at the back of the pocket, so you can get to it. Some some of the models rucksacks I've looked at have it in a far top corner, so you're struggling to get through it if you've got anything in.
Well, on my Kinlite today, mine's right at the front of it, so you've got to go right through the pocket to get to it.
So I like the idea with that. And the floating thing, I had a Gregory Z55 and I didn't like the floating lid, because if you put anything more than a few bits and pieces in it, as soon as you lift the lid like this, it would slide off down the straps. What Osprey have done, they've put a locking buckle here, which is great. So that means you can actually adjust the height of that so it doesn't fall off when you're not using it as a floating lid. So it acts very much like a fixed lid. Across the top you've got a nice compression come extra load holder. So I guess the size of that is probably too small for a bare canister, but a tent, something like an APCO perhaps, would fit happily on top of the load if you needed to, held in place, and obviously with the floating lid adjusted accordingly. Quite a strong thick cord when all these other straps are thin, which I found a bit interesting. And internally there's a huge hydration pocket, and similar to the Atmos, there's a zip across the top. Now this allows you to hang a hydration bladder in the airspace between your back of the pack and the mesh supporting your back. So rather than put the hydration bladder in there, you could hang it down the back in the airspace. Now obviously that would reduce the ventilation, but in the winter the heat off your back would probably keep the water quite nicely warm and stop it from freezing. The bladder I'm using at the moment won't actually hang off this because it hasn't got a single fixed point, but that would be easily remedied with a little bit of Dyneema to hang it in that space, but I opted to just use the pocket. I think there's much else I could say about the pack.
And then you said about the airspace.
Yeah, the airspace is the curving of the frame. I don't think you can see this. Is not as pronounced as the Atmos. And the Gregory tend to go out at a bigger angle, so you get a lot of airspace, but it makes packing the bag very difficult because of the curving of the rucksack frame, whereas this is a lot flatter in curve. So with the mesh on that, you obviously get a much more breathable and comfortable carry than something that fits straight onto your back, without the disadvantage of having a huge amount of space that makes the rucksack curve difficult to pack. I did try on an Atmos a few months ago in a shop, and I did try and stuff it with the bags that they get to load the sack to see how comfortable it was, and I had trouble pushing the first lump, which was supposed to be the sleeping bag, down the Atmos and into the bottom. So I'm quite happy with the way that the curve fits. And as somebody pointed out to me, Penny actually said this yesterday when she had a look at it, that this frame reminded her of those old hiking rucksacks that you used to see people, canvas ones on a metal frame. And believe it or not, it's pretty much the same shape. So, is it reinventing the wheel? I don't know, or just using something that was very useful then, today.
Cool, thanks for that, Barry. Okay, so here we are with the first competition of 2009, and this is the results. Just about to do the prize draw. You'll see I've got all the names entered into this fry bake here, and I'll just give that a flipping good shake so that everyone has a good chance. And let's see who the winner of the prize is, and it is going to JH. So that's John, and I think he's up in Scotland, but John, send us your address via email.